IB Nation Sports Talk, and as Joe just jumped in, it is a hump day. It's
Hoop, hoop.
Wednesday, the midweek mailbag. Vince DeDario is back. It's been a few weeks since we did a mailbag
It's
together.
true. Wednesdays, for whatever reason, have been my bugaboo here lately. Wednesdays are a problem. I don't know why. It's just let's plan stuff for Wednesday. So here we are. No
Here we
plans
are,
today.
here to answer questions. We've only got a few in, so get your questions in if you're logging
Yeah,
in
man.
right
Come
now.
on.
It's mailbag day. It's like this is the day we count on you. Let's start with some hard-hitting ones from Tommy Guns. Why is a pizza box square if the pizza is round? I guess it's because you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. I don't know.
Ooh. Well, and you never know really
around.
exactly how big a pizza is going to get when you're, doing at
Yeah.
least the pizza I buy. I don't know.
Right.
You got the spinning and, so you got to have some wiggle room, I guess is the best way to put it.
I guess that squares probably stack better than
That's a good call. That's a good call
circles too, right?
Yeah, it's a good call.
Because like you can
It's cleaner. It's
Yeah.
cleaner.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing is, we all know that pizza boxes come flat, and you got to fold them.
Right.
It's really difficult to fold into a circle.
Fold a circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it'd be more work, I think.
Yes.
Folding circles.
Logistics, people.
Tommy also wants to know, is there another word for thesaurus?
That word book.
He had a lot more that he was just flipping in there earlier, man. I don't know. I don't know what got into him, what's on his mind today,
Man.
but he can't say that we don't answer his questions.
No.
Or at least attempt to.
I mean, there was I read some of them. There's a lot going on there.
Yep. All right. Do you want to get to some actual questions?
Yes.
We don't have a lot in here right now. We're not sitting on a lot.
Come on, people. Come on.
So get them in. Get them in. Check out the backside here. Pat wants to know any health update on Colsey or Thomas. We're not going to get that till next week.
Yeah. I mean,
because that's when the next press conference is.
Thomas
was a bye week. We're not getting
Thomas played. Official. I mean, he played last week. Yeah. I mean, he didn't get targeted because Notre Dame doesn't target their outside wide receivers. And so
they did Chris Tyree because Tyree was
the slot.
Outside.
It was two slots. It was a trips formation.
I know it was trips because Jesse actually diagrammed it yesterday. I was thinking, was he in?
He was the middle guy.
Was he the second? Was he the middle guy? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. They had two slots.
Yeah. All right. They were still next to each other, which was what I was saying last week was.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So that was good. But you're right. For whatever reason, the outside receivers, they're not getting much of it. But still, it's like Sam Hartman's still not taking a lot of shots down the field. That was one of the few actual shots downfield, the one to Tyree that he took in that game. So
this is true.
Philip, if Notre Dame wins out, do they play in a New Year's Six game?
100%. No doubt about it. Yep. Because
I agree.
And here's my reasoning, right? I'm not going to just say yes and then go on to the next question.
You could.
I could. My reasoning behind it is if they were a one-loss team, I think they got a great shot at college football playoff. So if they're a two-loss team, next tier down, New Year's Six. And the New Year's Six games don't mean anything to anybody anymore, even though we will still celebrate if they win it because it'll be the first one that they've won since 1993. We would still celebrate that. But all they care about in the New Year's Six games now, if they're not a semifinal game, is ratings, right? That's all they care about. So if Notre Dame's even on the fringe of a New Year's Six game, they're in because Notre Dame brings eyeballs. So they're definitely going to make it if they win out. No doubt
100%. 100%. If they win out, they're going to end up being somewhere in the vicinity, top 10, top 12, in that range. That's where you need to be to make a New Year's Six game. And there are going to be plenty of other teams that are going to lose in front of them that are going to fall behind them if Notre Dame keeps winning out. Because a lot of these, it's conference play now. We're in the thick of conference play, and a lot of these teams are playing each other. Like you got Penn State, Ohio State this weekend, for example. You had Oregon, Washington last weekend, and you're going to get that litany of all these teams. USC is going to have to play both Washington and Oregon and Utah here in the next few weeks, plus UCLA at the end of the season. So there's going to be a lot of multi-loss teams who are not multi-loss teams right now. It's going to help Notre Dame out, assuming they keep winning.
This is true.
Joe says, what New Year's Six game do you want to see Notre Dame in, and who do you want them to play?
I mean, that's a tough one because let's go this route, Sean.
Okay.
You've got here your 4 available ones, right? The Cotton Bowl, which is an at-large versus an at-large.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Peach Bowl, which is at-large versus at-large, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Orange Bowl, which is the ACC versus the Big Ten or SEC. And you've got the Fiesta Bowl, which is at-large versus at-large. So there's more at-large teams. I always thought when the Rose Bowl wasn't played that they did a Pac-12 versus a Big Ten in a different bowl, which maybe they would do anyway. But the Rose Bowl is a semifinal, and so is the Sugar Bowl. So those are off the table.
Yeah.
So what that means is there's 6 at-large bids. That's more than usual. And so there's more of an opportunity for Notre Dame to play in multiple bowls, right? So I don't know. Like, where would you rather go? Dallas, Atlanta, Miami?
They've been to Dallas a couple times at this point, to Arlington, whatever, Jerry World.
They were in the Fiesta Bowl.
Atlanta would be something new.
It would. Yeah, it would.
I can't tell you the last, like, if they ever even played in a Peach Bowl, I don't think they have.
Because I thought the Peach Bowl had different tie-ins, so I didn't even think the Peach Bowl was available to Notre Dame, to be honest with you. Now, getting my information from Wikipedia at the moment, so take that for what it's worth. But I don't know. Let's go. I've been to a Fiesta Bowl. It was a lot of fun. It was great. Went golfing. It was a lot. I mean, it was good. It was great. I don't know that I want to do that again right away, right? So I don't know. Miami. I'm not really a Miami guy. So Peach Bowl would be fun.
I'd say Peach Bowl. Who they play, someone they can beat. That's all.
I don't really care. I honestly don't care who they play.
Yeah.
They gotta win. They gotta win.
I concur.
I mean, I know people want LSU, which is definitely a possibility, especially if they remain, a 2-loss team. I mean, that's definitely possible. I don't know. Do I want that hype? Do I really? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see as the season wears on if I would like that or not. Right. Would you want to see a Brian Kelly, like the Kelly Bowl? Would you really want to see that?
Nah, I really don't.
I don't think so either.
Still too soon. I just don't want any of that hype right now.
Yeah.
I could do without it.
Yeah. Agreed.
And other than that, like I said, it doesn't really matter. Just play somebody as long as they can win.
Yeah, I want to win. That's
need to win one of those New Year's Six bowls at this point.
Now, see if it's in Dallas though, you might be able to couple that with a Cowboys game.
Yeah, that's true.
It's possible. I don't know what the timing, how that all breaks down and all that, but I mean, it's possible.
By then they might be. I think they'll be into the NFL will be into the playoff. Well, maybe
no, because it's
right there on the fringe.
Let's see, it is December 30th. So don't they play regular season games into January, don't they?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know they play. I know they play in Buffalo. I can't remember exactly.
Pulling it up.
Who the end of the schedule? It might be. I don't know.
I'm pulling it up.
You pulling up the Cowboys schedule?
So January 7, they play the Commanders on the road, and then December 30th, they have a night game at home against the Lions.
Oh, that's right.
Could end up being a pretty darn good game.
Yeah.
And
be a game they end up losing. So I wouldn't want to waste my money on that.
I mean, they could play in the Cotton Bowl on the 29th, and then on the 30th, they're playing the Lions. It's not a bad back-to-back there, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Unless I want to see them win.
I mean, Lions might have shut it down by then. They might have had things wrapped up.
That's true. End of the season. I don't know if that's when I'd want to waste a lot of money on. Either way, that's a good point.
Good point. It's all good.
Who are your MVPs? Anthony wants to know.
Ooh, man, that's tough. And it's tough for 2 reasons. Defense, I think you got a lot of options.
Yeah.
Offense, I think you got a lack of options.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So,
I mean, offense, it's got to be Estime or Hartman, even though both of them have not had great games here the last few weeks for different reasons. But it's got to be one of those two. And like Hartman would be a slam dunk if they were still playing the way they were a month ago. But there's enough doubt right now, I think, that it's like, is he? Gosh, I don't know. Who would you go with between those?
Those are my top. Those were my top two. I was leaning towards Estime, to be honest with you, but I could make a great argument for either one. I could make an argument for Sam Hartman for sure, especially considering what he did the first 4 games. I could make an argument for Sam Hartman. I think I would go with Estime though. At this point, still a lot of football to be played.
Yeah, for sure.
Defense is tough.
I know.
Defense is really hard because you could go with an MVP for each level, like defensive line, linebacker, secondary. Because Cam Hart's played really, really well. Obviously, Xavier Watts had a hell of a game this past game. So, I mean, those would be my 2 candidates there. I mean, Benjamin Morrison's played well, but Cam Hart's played better this season, right? I think, linebacker, I think J.D. Bertrand should get some votes for MVP. He's played really, really well.
Yep.
Even though people hate him, he still played really, really well. And then up front, Howard Cross, I think, would be the front runner right now. But Javonte Jean-Baptiste has played really good football. I think Riley Mills has played good football. Now, there's a lot of options there.
I think that, and I agree with all of your points. I think that I would have to go with Howard Cross right now.
Okay. I think he's been the most consistent.
Yeah.
Right?
No defensive lineman with more tackles than him. And yeah, you don't see defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, especially with the amount of tackles that Howard Cross has. So I think it starts with him at the point of attack. That's why I'd have to go with him right now.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And a close second for me would be Cam Hart. Those would be my 2, to be honest. And then third would be J.D. Bertrand. That's how I would rank them right now defensively.
Probably go that direction as well.
We need some more questions, people. I'm starring some crazy questions right now. And obviously, Sean is the filter. So
Brian, I don't know if I haven't got all the way through this. So the slot position creates mismatches that you don't get on the outside, therefore should be the number one look more often. Coverage is usually softer and the matchup is against linebacker or safety. So again, it's more of a statement, less
true question. False. He's looking for a true false on that.
There it is. Right at the very beginning. True or false?
I mean, it's essentially true, but you can't ignore the outside receivers, which Notre Dame has done over the last few games. They've only thrown to the slots. So, yes, it creates mismatches, but you have to be more multiple than just going to the slot all the time. So, there's the answer. And more often than not, teams are not covering. They do to a degree, if it depending on who you have in the slot, right? Whether you're going to be covered by a linebacker or a safety. But there's a lot of really good nickels out there who are the third corner who are covering the slot as well. So it's not like the old days where they're just flexing out a linebacker on like a Percy Harvin. I mean, Percy Harvin used to eat defense's lunch because, there was a mismatch, right? Back in the day when Florida was doing their thing. Now you got more nickel, more dime, things of that nature. So it's not the mismatch that I think a lot of people think it is.
Yeah. What I loved about lining Faison and Tyree up right next to each other is exactly what you saw on that play, because you've got 2 speed guys playing inside. Safety's got to go somewhere, and then you've just got a one-on-one with the other guy. You ended up one-on-one Chris Tyree with a corner, and it worked out perfectly. But yeah, it doesn't really answer this question. The bottom line, like the first Louisville interception, Flores is playing outside and they throw a jump ball to basically their smallest outside receiver. Now they're still banged up at that point. I don't think Greathouse barely played, at all. And I think that's what they'll get out of this bye week.
Well,
they can
he
shut
played a
guys
bunch,
down.
But he played on the outside, and so he didn't get thrown to.
Well,
he was
my
open.
point is Flores was an outside guy on that play, and that's who they chose to throw a jump ball to on that play. That's not the guy I'd be throwing, up a jump ball, Rico Flores, in a jump ball situation. But that's
Greathouse played a ton. They just never threw him the ball. And he was open, by the way, a lot.
Yeah. Again, it's just weird because it's not the way things were operating early in the season.
Exactly. That's the hard, it's not like they haven't done it. And that's the most frustrating part about all of this. It's not like they haven't done it.
Jeff, if all the wide receivers are back from injury, et cetera, and can play the rest of the year, who do you see being the most productive becoming number one option or option one?
If everybody's 100% healthy, it's going to be Jaden Greathouse. I think he's the one that Hartman kind of fell in love with early, but then he got hurt. And so I feel like if everybody's healthy and they're back, then he is the guy that he wants to throw to. I'm hoping that if they're going to put him on the outside, I really hope that that's the case, because then it opens up more on the inside as well.
They pretty much have to put him on the outside at this point because of the fact that you've got Tyree and Faison both out there,
Right.
And again, I like what they can do with that, but somebody's got to play outside, and Greathouse should be able to be just as productive playing out there.
Right. Agreed. I want more speed. Get your guys out there. If you're a wide receiver, you should know all three positions. Period.
And I mean, he's asking who's going to be the most productive option one. I don't think there's ever going to be an option one in this offense, first of all. And like you look at even Chris Tyree, again, he's over 20 yards per catch and he's got all these yards, but he doesn't have high volume to him. It's a handful, 2 to 3 catches per game is what he's getting right now. Like, the most volume has gone to Mitchell Evans, and really even he's kind of disappeared the last couple of games.
This is true.
Not completely disappeared, but again, in terms of
they
volume,
did a good job of bracketing him and covering him. USC did, and they left everybody else one-on-one. I mean, they were saying, "Hey, you're not going to throw to your favorite guy, and we don't think you're going to throw to anybody else," and they stacked the box.
Let's keep it on the receivers. Brent, any sources have an explanation for the absence of Braylon James?
Freshman who's not ready. I mean, that's the explanation. I mean, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out, because if he was ready, he'd be playing. I mean, Jordan Faison was a walk-on freshman, and he's playing.
If Braylon James was ready, Jordan Faison wouldn't have a scholarship right now.
100% accurate. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I don't know what it is that makes him not ready. I don't know. There's a million different possibilities, right? But if he was ready, he had ample opportunity the last 2 games to come in and play, and he's not. And they elevated
last 3, because going back to Duke, remember when they had 3 scholarship receivers because they hadn't played Faison at that point, and I think that's the one that you've got to point to when you're down to as few scholarship receivers who are healthy as they had in that game, and there's no James. It just comes down to the fact that James isn't ready to do it for whatever reason that happens to be. And of the 3 freshmen that we saw going back to spring and into fall camp, he was definitely behind the other 2. That doesn't mean that he's still not going to be good and he can't do some things down the road, but it just clicks sooner than it does for some guys than others.
Yep. He's just not ready.
Yeah.
Man,
because they've shown that they're past this whole you've got to know everything if you're a freshman and all this stuff with what they. I mean, look, like Faison had double whammy. He's not only a true freshman, but he was a walk-on lacrosse player.
Yes, who was on the scout team.
Yeah, who worked his way from scout team to scholarship wide receiver and productive scholarship wide receiver in a span of 2 weeks. So they're not hesitant by any means. It's just if they're ready, they'll play. I have no doubt about that. So
yes,
all we can read into it is he's not ready.
The fact that they elevated Faison, just it's like they put in all caps bold that Braylon James isn't ready. You know what I mean? Like he's not ready. We went and found somebody else because he's not ready, period. And so, yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. That is, again, like you said, it doesn't mean he's not going to be a productive player for Notre Dame in the future. He's still a true freshman, but he's just not ready. So he's not playing.
Salty getting into some deep stuff here with Jack Swarbrick. He says he's openly talking about bargaining with college athletes to settle the long debate about fair compensation. Is he correct? Athletes need a solution. And I haven't read this article. I think Ross Dellinger I think he's at Yahoo now, if I remember right. He used to be at SI. I heard he and Dan Wetzel and Pat Forty, I heard part of their College Football Inquirer podcast. He was talking about how Jack Swarbrick, when they did some of the congressional testimony a few months back, there was a couple lines that Jack Swarbrick had in there about how he does think that college athletes need to be essentially employees, and going down that road. And they made a good point in the podcast. It's interesting that he and Gene Smith at Ohio State have kind of taken this position, but they're also going to be retiring very soon. So
sure.
it's like
voices get
this
louder
is where
when
you
you're
guys
out.
need to go. And by the way, I'm getting out of here so you can deal with it if you decide to enact this.
Yeah, it sounds like from what I was reading that Swarbrick basically went all the way, but not quite far enough to say that they should be employees. They're saying they should have revenue sharing. Right. There should be like a collective bargaining agreement, essentially.
Which is, essentially,
I mean, it's like you said, without saying it,
you can say they're not employees,
right,
but if you're going collective bargaining, then yeah.
Well, and I think what they're trying to stay away from would be like insurance premiums and like, all the legal stuff that happens if they are actually employees, right? And so that's why they're not saying it. At least that's my guess as to why they're not saying it, because of all the legal ramifications that come with them being employees, right? But he's arguing for the players that they should get a revenue share. Honestly, I don't see the problem with that. I really don't. I don't see the problem with a revenue sharing situation for athletes. The issue is going to be how, is it going to be
who do you pay and how much?
All sports, and is it going to be equal across the entire 85-man roster? Do the walk-ons get something? Like, there's a lot to iron out there, and the percentages and all of those different things. So they're a long ways away from making that happen. And the key point to this whole thing, and Swarbrick said it, is it has to be enforceable. So who's going to enforce it, and what's going to happen if you do something wrong?
I mean, yeah, you think
we know the NCAA has no spine.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
therein lies the problem.
Exactly.
Anthony, do we see changes on the offensive line after the bye week?
I don't think so. I mean, they did the rotation 2 weeks ago. They did not do it this past week. I don't think we see changes. I mean, this would be when I would do it if there needed to be change. If they had another performance on Saturday like they had the previous 2 weeks, then I would have said absolutely yes. But I thought the offensive line as a whole played a lot better Saturday night than they did the previous 2 weeks, right? So I don't see any changes forthcoming, but I would not be surprised if maybe there was a set rotation or something along those lines. But I don't think that they lost their position based on the way they played on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that things at least came back around together pretty good. Like Marcus Freeman said, they would swap guys in and out if the game dictated that that's what they needed to do, if someone wasn't playing well enough, and they played well enough against USC. Now, USC should have a better defensive line than what they have, with Bear Alexander and some of these other transfers that they've got on that defensive line. They should be better, but that's not how they played. Notre Dame's offensive line definitely outplayed USC's defensive front. I mean, just again, going back to the fact that they had 57 tackles for loss and all these sacks, top 3 in the nation in both going in, and all they got was 1 tackle for loss the whole game. Now that's obviously, so my point is they played well against a team that had been doing well in those departments, even though they still weren't a great defense. So yeah, I don't really expect that we see much change coming out of this bye week based on the fact that it was better, a lot better against USC last week. Vince is shaking his head.
Yeah, agreed.
This is going to be an interesting one. And you know what? Should I save this for rapid fire? Because I kind of have something, quarterback related in rapid fire. Do that.
I hadn't thought about this one until the other day when somebody put it on the board about like how many games that Sam Hartman's going to play. And somebody responded something along the lines of, he ain't playing in the bowl games, so it doesn't even matter, or something like that. I was like, I hadn't even thought about that,
Yep. Here's another bye week question. By the way, Zach Martin with an H, not a K, not the guy down in Dallas, but still a good name.
Should be.
We got a couple of other of his questions start up that I'm going to kind of push into rapid fire as well, because they're a little broader, I think.
I like it.
But Zach says, with the bye week, who's your guess for a guy to sort of come out of nowhere or takes that next step after self-scouting? I mean, this is tough, but if I were just to go based on like what we saw the other night, I might go with our guy Bubakor, the freshman. Had the play off the edge the other night, and it's not like any of the other Vipers. It's not that they're playing horribly, but none of them are lighting the world on fire right now. So maybe Bubakor gets some more opportunities over the last 4 or 5 games.
That's not bad. I don't mind that one. That's a good one, actually, because I was trying to, like, the thing is, like, normally bye weeks come a lot earlier in the season. We played 8 games. Like, is somebody going to actually come out of nowhere after 8 games? Like, that's going to be really tough to do. But Bubakar is a good one to fall into that category because, yes, he had the sack in the last game, which was a huge situation, obviously. But is he going to become more of a rotation guy? Is he going to be involved? That's actually a very good one because I mean, you could say Faison, but he was very involved in the game plan this past week. So would that count as a coming out of nowhere? Probably not. Man, I was really struggling to come up with somebody because I think we've seen pretty much everybody do something.
Like unless it's Braylon James or,
Right. And
Eli Raridan maybe, but even then there's still 2 tight ends. What's crazy about the whole tight end situation, I've said this a few times, like everyone was talking about a Holden Stays there for a couple weeks, like he was the next great Notre Dame tight end. But then here comes Mitchell Evans, and really we've seen barely, like Holden Stays has a 100-yard receiving game this season.
That's
true. 2 tight ends, each of those tight ends has a 100-yard receiving game. But we really haven't heard that much of Holden Stays since really the emergence of Mitchell Evans as kind of the go-to guy. So it's my point is it's tough to even say that like Raridan is going to sort of come out of nowhere along those lines because the other 2 guys have both shown they can do it, and one kind of pushed the other one down.
And Raridan's sitting at number 3 right now, and I don't see him surpassing either one of those 2 guys in the near future, right? And they're not going to do a ton of 13 personnel, right? So that would be very difficult. I think he's sitting at number 3. He might be sitting at number 4, depending. You know what I mean? Because Flanagan is really the number 3, and he comes in on the short yardage and is kind of in the backfield as that wing position.
What do you think about this one from Jeff? Do you think we'll see more of Burnham in place of Botello the last 4 games? Jordan has just not done it, Jeff says.
I do. I think Burnham is going to earn some reps here over the last 4 games. I do. He was getting very limited reps, and we've seen those reps increase throughout the 8 games, and I think that's not going to stop. I think it's going to continue.
That's really the position on the defensive line that we had much higher expectations for going into this season, but of the 4 spots, it has been the least productive this year. They're obviously getting a lot more on the other side out of Javonte John Baptiste in the 2 interior positions.
Yeah.
Between Cross and Riley Mills, especially Mills these last few games. So, again, that's why I went with Bubakar Traore. I can't say his name now. That's why I went with Bubakar because of because of the fact that they're not getting a lot of production. So maybe we do. Maybe it's Burnham and Bubakar more. I don't know.
I was looking for my pronunciation guide. Is it Traore? Is that how you say it?
I
Is it
think
Traore?
I think so. I think it's Traore.
Okay. I don't know where it is.
Sean Michael, thoughts on the youth movement? I couldn't help but think when Traore got his sack that Keeley must be thinking down at Bama. Could have been him.
I mean, if Keeley was at Notre Dame, he would have played before game 8, first of all. So, yes, it could have been him, but he would have played long, long ago, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. Matt, who do you think could have helped most if they came back between Avery Davis and Braden Lindsey?
Man,
that's tough. I would say Avery Davis, assuming he was healthy.
That was going to be mine too. And my reasoning behind it is he's a sure-handed kid. He's really good at routes. His football IQ is so high. And not that Braden Lindsey's isn't, but I think they've got guys with Braden Lindsey's skill set on the roster as we speak. And so now I would take either one of them or both. I think that would be great. Give some more depth to the wide receiving core, but I would take Davis.
Yeah, Davis had a couple 100-yard receiving games 2 years ago. We haven't seen a 100-yard receiver over the last 2 seasons. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and Davis was productive when he was healthy. And I mean, Lindsey obviously could have come back, and he opted not to pursue football even. And I just think it would have been Davis. Joe wants to know, did you find the pronunciation?
I found it, finally.
What is it?
And it's on page 6. I was way in the back. It's Traore.
Traore, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a silent E. Okay.
I need to let some of the people on the beat know that because they're butchering it. But it's Trey or Re.
Okay.
So Traore.
All right.
Love it. Good old pronunciation guide here. Love it.
Joe wants to know if we think that they'll sit Faison to get his red shirt.
Nope. I sure don't. I mean, they're not worried about his red shirt right now. They wouldn't have given up a scholarship and made him a big part of the offense in the last game if they were thinking we're only going to play him for 4 games. No way.
Exactly. And that was going to be my point. Exactly. You're not giving this kid a scholarship in the middle of a season, a football scholarship, a full football scholarship, if you're just going to sit him and redshirt him. He's there to play all the way, and he can help, as we saw. Even when he wasn't being thrown the football, he helped set up that touchdown to Chris Tyree. So there's with the state that the wide receiving core is in right now, they need Jordan Faison, and that's why he's out there. So they're not just going to give him a scholarship and then sit him for a couple games, or what would it be, 3 games or whatever, and try to keep a scholarship.
No way.
All right. I think the rest of these I'm going to save for rapid fire.
Nice.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
Always ready for rapid fire, sir.
All right. Got a lot. We're going to go a lot of places in rapid fire today.
All right. Let's do it.
So first of all, fill in the blank. Sam Hartman citing UFC champion John Jones after the USC game is blank.
I mean, it is evidence that young guys like the UFC. I mean, I know there's old guys that like it too, but I'm just not one of them. So
I was sitting there.
It fell on deaf ears for me.
And he said, just like John Jones said, and you may not like some of the things that he says. And I'm like, who's this John Jones? Is he like some controversial philosopher that I don't know of? Or like, is he some political figure? Who is this John Jones? And then I got home and I looked him up and I'm like, oh, UFC heavyweight champion. Okay. Yeah. John Jones. All right. And he just talked about butterflies and, like the butterflies lined up and all this different stuff. And you're right. I was going to ask you if you had any idea who John Jones was. I had never heard the name At least of this John Jones. I've probably heard of other John Joneses before, but not this one.
Yeah, and this isn't a popular take, I'm sure, but just not a UFC guy, not an Ultimate Fighting guy. I don't know. And I'm not a boxing guy either, so it probably all coincides. Stick him in a cage.
That's true.
I don't know. It's just not my thing.
That's true. Vince is a lover, not a fighter. He's not a fisticuffs kind of guy.
Italian.
That's exactly right. Now, on the subject of old heads, Zach says, as a couple of olds, not unlike me, what was your tape deck you played on repeat in high school?
Man, this is a question for you.
This is one. It's funny that you brought this up today, Zach, because somehow last week, the Money for Nothing, Dire Straits. Are you aware of that song?
I am.
A couple of things. One, my senior year of high school, I had a Jeep, and my sister was in middle school. So at the start of the school year, when the weather's nice, the top is off the Jeep, and that Dire Straits, that album, Brothers in Arms, came out, I think, like at the beginning of summer. And so like Money for Nothing was like the huge song. And so in the cassette deck, like my sister used to tell me, I'd be blaring that song going to school every day. And that's all that people in middle school would talk about. The rest of the day was
what you were playing.
Was her sister, or her brother playing Money for Nothing going to school. And I also I just found this out, like the falsetto at the beginning, the I Want My MTV. I'm not going to try to sing it in the very high pitched.
I want my MTV. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I'm glad you tried it, not me.
You're welcome.
That is Sting. And
really,
I had that album, I had that cassette. I played it all the time. I literally found out last week that was Sting who sings that part of the song. Never knew that was Sting with Dire Straits. So that was the one. That was the big one. After that, it would probably be Back in Black, AC/DC. That's
nice.
Those are
nice.
I've given you time to think of something.
Well,
so I mean, come up with something now.
I didn't listen to the radio that often, to be honest with you. I was
listening
to sports talk and stuff like that. But when I did throw in, now it was CDs for me, right? But when I did throw one in, I had like the Dazed and Confused soundtrack. So there's some really good music in that movie. And so I would just have that thing on repeat. And I listened to a lot of weird stuff when I was a kid. Like I really liked the Temptations. I really like Michael Jackson, stuff like that. So, but I was very eclectic, throw a little Billy Joel in there, some classic rock.
Okay.
Yes, nice. I was all over the place. But like, I'm the kind of guy that I have no idea who's singing it or whatever, but I just
like to sing
it.
Along.
I do. I sing along. I sound terrible. I sing along with all of it, and I don't even know who's singing it, but I enjoy it.
That's right.
So there you go.
NH says first day junior year, The Cult, Sonic Temple. That's a good album as well. Firewoman, Sun King, both very similar sounding, but I like both of those as well. I've got that CD somewhere around here still. Ryan wants to know what hairstyles we were rocking in high school. I did my best to avoid like the mullet. And Ryan, I think, wrestled, so like he's familiar with this, and I wrestled, like from 5th grade all through high school. And you obviously, I think now they're a little bit more lax with the hair, but we had like hair regulations. Your hair couldn't be, could only be so long and all that kind of stuff. So mine was really just kind of plain.
I had hair regulations because I went to Catholic school, and so you couldn't have your hair past the earlobes at my school, and you had to be clean shaven. But you could have. So the big thing when I was in high school in the late 90s was the sideburns. So like everybody grew their sideburns as low as they could because you could only go to the earlobes. So
it's funny though, watching like some high school boys try to grow their sideburns because like if the whiskers aren't quite coming in, it's like pointy little scraggly hairs, basically.
Yes. I never had that problem. I had the sideburns going. as much as I could. But yeah, I didn't really have like long hair. It was the same as like the length of my side. So yeah.
All right. Good question, Zach.
Yeah.
You got us kind of sidetracked there.
Yes, you did. Well, that's what we do.
Let's get back to some football. What's more likely to happen? Notre Dame has one receiver top 100 yards in a game this season, or a running back not named Audric Estime goes over 100 rushing yards in a game?
I think this one's fairly easy. I think this is going to be a running back. I do. I think there's going to be, and I think it might be Love. I think he's got the best shot at it, to be honest with you. So I'm going to take a running back, and I'll name one that's going to do it.
I think so as well. And, again, we kind of went into this. It's been 21 consecutive games since Notre Dame had a wide receiver with a 100-yard game. The Fiesta Bowl, Lorenzo Styles.
Oh, yeah.
The Fiesta Bowl, the last 100-yard receiver the Irish had. So I agree. I would go with Jeremiah Love as well. I would lean that direction, but it just seems like it. And again, like Jesse and I were talking about yesterday, it's so crazy that in one game, Notre Dame had 2 pass plays of 70+ yards, and neither of those receivers
got 100 yards.
Got 100 yards in those games.
Crazy.
And they got what, 2/3 of it, or 70, whatever, more than 2/3 of it on those one pass plays, and they still didn't get to 100 yards. So I'm going with the running back as well.
Yeah, I just don't see the consistency in the pass game right now. Yep. It's not that it can't be done. It's just, I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in it.
So this is the one that I saved the Sam Hartman question for. I'll ask my question first.
Okay.
So Notre Dame obviously has 2 losses right now with 4 games to go, not including a bowl. And there have been a lot of fans saying Steve Angeli needs to get more meaningful reps. So first, do you buy or sell that?
Sell. It's a huge sell. Big time sell. I'm not changing anything about my depth chart to get younger guys in, right? If they prove themselves in practice and they prove to get, playing time, that's one thing, right? But it's not going to be a situation where like, oh, sorry guys, season's over. You're out, they're in. No, I'm not doing that. That's a huge sell.
Completely agree. This is not developmental time just because you've lost a couple games. There's still a lot to play for. You still brought in a graduate transfer quarterback. You've still got the entire team to think about. You think about next year when it's time to think about next year. But the question that does go with this, that James asks, will Sam Hartman play in the bowl game with an agent opposing?
So like his agent doesn't want him to. Is he going to still do it? If it's a New Year's 6 game, yes, he plays. If it's not, no, he doesn't. That's my caveat.
I mean, just like Sam Hartman, he could still make the decision, whatever bowl game it is, to shut it down. I tend to lean toward what you're saying there, that if it's a New Year's 6 bowl, he would not opt out and he would play. Now, there's still the chance, that he could opt out.
Sure.
I think that he would do what you're saying, though. And it just seems like that's his personality.
Agreed. Agreed.
It doesn't seem like he would shut it down.
I guess it wouldn't shock me if they made it into a New Year's 6 and he decided not to play. I guess it wouldn't shock. I would be disappointed.
And this is kind of what I was going to go toward this as well. He hasn't even, as Mr. 2.0 says, he hasn't even played himself into a day 2 yet. Can we, so like that's the other part. And that's what I was kind of like one of those sighs that I had, like he's not a definite NFL guy yet. There are still plenty of questions about Sam Hart. I mean, just look at what's happened these last 4 games. There's still a lot that he has to
There was
answer.
Opportunities for him to put the team on his shoulders, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I give you that.
That's exactly right.
I'll give you that. And that's kind of where we're at, right? And there's 4 games left. Well, a huge one on the road against Clemson. I mean, if he has a coming out party against Clemson, I think that puts some of the doubters to rest, to be honest with you, because Clemson's got a good defense. It's on the road, all of those different things. The other 3 games that they're going to play, it doesn't matter what he does, if I'm being honest. I mean, he still needs to go out there and be productive and be efficient and, all of those different things. But he's got one more opportunity in the regular season to turn some heads of NFL execs. Then if they do win all 4 games, then he gets a chance to maybe prove them wrong again in the bowl game, right? Mm-hmm. So I think right now he needs to play in the bowl game.
As Ryan Roberts says, Sam had a sixth round grade from the NFL before the season. No reason not to play. And I don't think that whatever his grade would be now would be considerably higher. There's no guarantee even right now that he's going to be at the combine in February.
Oof. So woof. I hope so.
I mean, there's no guarantee. Like if you're a 6th round,
how many are you taking? How many quarterbacks go there though?
That's a good question.
I mean, Ryan can help us out here a little bit since he's in the chat. I mean, are there 10 quarterbacks that get invited? Is he a top 10 quarterback? Would 10 quarterbacks, if he's the 10th quarterback, does that mean he's a 6th rounder? Because we all know that quarterbacks get drafted higher than, maybe they should, right? So I'm curious to see what Ryan would say to that.
I saw, I think it was last week at some point, like top 10 quarterbacks through, whatever weeks it was of the season, and he was not included in there, So, yeah, Ryan says he thinks it's usually around 15. So you would think that he would
get invited
in that ballpark.
But, so, I mean, he's got to be top 15, right?
Yeah.
It's got
350 total players. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, is he in your top 15 right now, Mr. Rise and Draft? You got all the knowledge, dog.
DK says Tom Brady was 6th round. That's true, but you still can't go. Okay. You still can't go on the outlier. That's how many other 6th round guys are in the Hall of Fame? I mean, modern 6th round guys are in the Hall of Fame.
Brock Purdy, baby's on his way. Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah. So now tell me about all the 1st round guys who flopped.
Yeah, exactly.
Make your Ryan Leaf your all Ryan Leaf list. So, yeah. And then, Mr. 2.0, Ian Book was a 3rd rounder.
What do you want to talk about overdrafting? That would be a prime example right there. Yeah. Prime example.
Yeah, Ryan says Sam will no doubt be a Senior Bowl or EWS.
I think
that.
A Senior Bowl invite would be huge for him, to be honest with you, because that's an opportunity to really work with NFL coaches, be around those scouts for all those practices. Right. I think that would be massive for him to get a Senior Bowl invite.
Yep. Okay, so I've got some audio here. This is New York Post sports media columnist Andrew Marchand on the Marchand and Oran Sports Media podcast. The subject of Notre Dame's NBC football broadcast booth has kind of been a hot topic, not just in Notre Dame circles this week, but nationally after the national telecast Saturday night. So here is Andrew Marchand talking about the NBC Notre Dame TV booth.
NBC, they struggled on Saturday for Notre Dame and USC, and it started with the booth, Jack Collinsworth and Jason Garrett. I said this about Collinsworth when he first started at the Notre Dame job. He doesn't have the experience that you need to be in that role, to be a play-by-player. He's a young guy. Chris Collinsworth, his son. But the idea is not that you're young or someone's son. It's that he just doesn't feel natural in that role because he hasn't done enough games to be on that level. And then you have a inexperienced game analyst in Jason Garrett, who started last year, and they've done some games, some USFL games as well. And I actually think Garrett, what he actually says is not that bad. I think there's something to work with. It's just he's very low energy, a little robotic. And so I think that gets lost. Maybe with a more experienced play-by-play guy, he might come across a little better. Flood obviously has had a lot of success in his career. Even if you look at the Big Ten team he put together with Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge, they got that one right. That one's been a success.
All right, again, so there is Andrew Marchand, who's been a guest on this show about a year ago. We talked to him right after the season, actually, about some about, like the contract and the NBC booth and all this different stuff. That was him on the Marchand and Oran Sports Media podcast. So Vince, again, like you haven't had a chance to discuss any of this week. And again, the booth was taking some pretty big hits, and you heard what Marchand had to say. What do you think?
I think he was incredibly fair.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't bashing those guys, but he's saying Jack Collinsworth doesn't have the experience to be in that booth. He just doesn't have it. He hasn't called enough games. And, calling games, and calling games is about repetition, just doing it and doing it and doing it and just getting games under your belt and just over and over and over until you become really good at it. He's not ready for that yet. And I agree when it comes to Jason Garrett as well. I don't think he's bad. I just think that he's not being propped up the way he should be by a veteran play-by-play guy. Right. Because that's what veteran play-by-play guys do. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When I started doing games with you, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But you set me up. Like, you would set me up so I sounded good. Like, that's what a veteran play-by-play guy does. And then after literally you and I doing hundreds of games together, it became more natural and it became a good pairing, right? That's what these guys need. They need more time and more reps. Now, again, you can bring along a virgin color guy if you have a really good play-by-play veteran play-by-play guy. That's just not what's happening here. You've got two rookies in there who sound like rookies, and it's a detriment to Jason Garrett, and it's not obviously doing anything for Jack Collinsworth either.
No, it's not. I mean, he's just getting bashed left and right. Michael said, I haven't noticed this. I don't watch a lot of the NBC. Like Michael said, have you guys noticed NBC's pulled Jack off the Sunday Night Football pregame show? I hadn't noticed that. And it's funny because, again, it's like earlier in the season, I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, and he just out of the blue called Jack Collinsworth. What did he call him? Try to think of. I'll think of it later. But he wasn't kind to Jack Collinsworth. Sure. Let's put it that way.
That has nothing to do with Jack as a
Nepo
person.
Nepo Jack.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
He just straight out called him Nepo Jack.
But that's why he got the job.
Right.
Because he sounds exactly like his dad.
Right. But there's a big difference between an experienced analyst who sounds like Chris Collinsworth and an inexperienced play-by-play announcer who sounds like Chris Collinsworth, Jack Collinsworth. Basically.
And here's the other thing, though. Chris Collinsworth is a color guy. He's not a play-by-play guy.
And that's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's a big difference.
Yeah,
there's a big difference in what you need from those two positions.
Right.
But experience is the biggest thing. And this to me is kind of similar to the whole, like what Monday Night Football went through for several years. For about 15 years, after Al Michaels and John Madden went over to NBC, really the only talk you heard about the Monday Night Football booth, especially like it amplified in the Booger McFarland, Jason Witten failed experiment years, was how bad the Monday Night Football booth was, until Aikman and Buck took over it last year. That was the whole narrative and the whole conversation. That's all anybody talked about was like, why is the Monday Night Football booth so bad? And there's some similarity as well to like when Drew Brees was actually doing Notre Dame football a couple of years ago. And then remember when he did the NFL playoff game and he was just horrible. And it's like, there's a big difference between when a couple million people are watching you and now all of a sudden the audience is literally 10 times that. And like the audience the other night wasn't 10 times the normal audience of a Notre Dame football game, but that's what happened to Drew Brees. The audience got bigger, people pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And like
it
there's a big difference between Central Michigan on Peacock when Collinsworth and Garrett are doing that game and 7-8 million people watching Notre Dame USC, the biggest Notre Dame USC NBC TV audience in 18 years, which is what they had the other night. There's more scrutiny because more people are watching. Nobody complained when it was Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge doing Notre Dame, Ohio State, because it was at least a competent booth. Eagle's about the same age as Collinsworth, but he is 10 times more experienced and qualified than Collinsworth. And that's essentially what it comes down to right now. If the play-by-play announcer was more qualified and better sounding, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation because of some of the stuff you were talking about. He could make Jason Garrett at least a little bit better. I've said it before. He could bring more out of Jason Garrett. And so, again, like to my Monday Night Football comparison, you don't have to have the best booth on TV. You just can't have the worst booth on TV.
Right.
And that's unfortunately what NBC has when they've got these two guys together right now.
It is. And it is the worst combo on TV right now. And it's the most watched. And that's the problem, right? There are many other combos that I would rather have in the Notre Dame booth than these two. I mean, it just is what it is. And again, I know I've said this 1,000 times, but it's not Jason Garrett's fault. Jason Garrett comes across as, not energetic and all of these different things. He's just not getting set up. I mean, at all. And so he's having to pull the chain along with him. And it just makes him sound even worse.
Yeah. Michael wants to know why we're having this conversation. And he put an LOL at the end. Okay. Well, we're having this conversation because, again, the TV audience was much bigger Saturday night. It was in prime time where more eyeballs are watching and listening, and they have been getting bashed by national outlets across the country. It's not just Notre Dame fans complaining now. It is national media personalities and outlets just openly on Twitter, on this podcast I was talking about, in print, bashing these guys.
What do you think about
this? It's just not a good look for anybody.
What do you think about this, Sean? From Beezer12 Washing Beard. He says, we've been clamoring to have a Notre Dame guy in the booth, and when we have one, we crucify him.
But that's because he's not good. He's not qualified.
Look, people want
it shouldn't matter. What you really want is a Notre Dame analyst. The play-by-play guy, no matter who, is supposed to be relatively neutral. And to me, watching that broadcast the other night, even though I know that we had some Notre Dame people complaining in the second half or they're talking too much about USC. That's always going to be a national broadcast, especially when you have these, bigger programs that Notre Dame is playing. NBC doesn't want a couple of homers in the booth. They want what's supposed to be a national broadcast. And it did feel like to me, especially from Collinsworth's standpoint, because a lot of people complained about how monotone they were and those kind of like he was trying to play it down the middle and not sound like he was a Notre Dame guy.
It's almost trying too hard. That was the problem. And look, there have been critiques of this guy, and I've heard them, but he's not even the best play-by-play guy to come out of Notre Dame. Mike Monaco is better than Jack Collinsworth. And Mike Monaco has a ton of experience under his belt because he's just been calling games for years. And so if the prerequisite is to have a Notre Dame guy in the booth, and as a play-by-play guy, I would get Mike Monaco over Jack Collinsworth.
I know they tried to get him on the radio a few years ago, and when Paul Burmeister ended up getting it, but he wanted the ability to still do his ESPN stuff and other stuff, and they shot it down. They wanted his only focus to be on, Notre Dame radio, which is odd because Burmeister is still allowed to do other things. He still works for NBC, but from what I've told, that's what happened. But you're, and Mike Monaco's in a much better place right now because if he were only working for NBC, what else would he be doing? I mean, now he's doing Little League World Series. He's doing College World Series. He does Red Sox games. He does
all over the place.
He does college basketball. He does other college football games. He's able to do a lot of stuff by being where he's at and getting a lot of experience, which is what Jack Collinsworth should have been doing. But Michael Hahn makes a very fair and very accurate point. It's not Jack and Garrett's fault that they're in the booth. It's the fault of the execs to put them there. That's right. You don't hire yourself. They were ultimately hired. And so not knocking them for taking the job, just they're in a national network TV broadcast booth, and that leaves them open to scrutiny every time they open their microphones. And, so it's no, I don't blame them for taking the job, but I just, it's up for criticism if they're not worthy of the job. And then, again, I don't know what else to say about it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean,
and we did talk about it earlier in the week, but again, the reason I brought it up today is because you have yet again another, like, especially in the media circles, Andrew Marchand is very well known, so like he's someone that people at all the networks, like, they're all listening to that podcast, and he's talking about it and giving his fair and honest critique.
It was fair and honest, man. It just was. He's saying what we all have known for quite some time, basically. Yeah.
So on the subject of TV, fill in the blank. It's blank that Ohio State fans were in a tizzy last weekend because they had to pay for Peacock to watch the Buckeyes play Purdue.
Welcome to our lives. Okay? Welcome to the life of being a Notre Dame fan, and the Big Ten married itself to NBC. So good luck to you, because you better get the Peacock channel or Peacock app or whatever if you want to watch all your games, because it's going to happen to every one of y'all Big Ten fans. You're all going to get put on Peacock.
That's it.
You're all going to have to buy it.
That's it.
Sorry.
That is exactly it. I mean, tell me again why Notre Dame would be better off in the Big Ten. Like, the Big Ten is getting that big fat paycheck, and they've still got to, have some games on the Peacock. That's part of the deal. You're exactly right. You got to live with it. You want that paycheck. You got your paycheck, but you're also going to have to pay to watch games on Peacock. Now, I did see there was a bar who, I wish I might actually have it right here. This was interesting because apparently, okay, so here it is. I've got it. I'm going to have to kind of squint down. A local bar posted this about Ohio State playing on Peacock. He says, "I've been the biggest Ohio State fan and always will be. If this is what's happening in Peacock and TV contract, it is criminal. For small businesses across Ohio and Buckeye Nation bars across the country, here's what we have to do to televise a game. DirecTV customers, they have to pay $699 times 12-month commitment per TV in their establishment." So, like, for a bar to televise the game, because it's on Peacock, I think DirecTV has some kind of carriage deal, with these streamers so that bars can do this. But it is a couple hundred, like over $20,000 a year, basically, because if you're going to show it on more than one TV, you've got to pay per TV. So, like, for the bar owners and stuff, I completely sympathize.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's brutal.
That is brutal, man.
You got to sell a lot of beer and burgers to make that money back.
No kid. It's like, sorry guys, we're not watching the game today. It's not going to be here. You're going to take a hit, obviously, because people want to watch the game. I get that, but man, that's brutal. Everybody's going to be watching it on their phone in the bar.
That's right. That's kind of funny, actually. Like if you went into a bar and everyone's drinking their beer and watching games on their phone, or they got their iPad out.
God, how terrible! People come in with their laptops, that kind of thing. Jeez.
Zach wants to know, would you rather see Jim Harbaugh or Brian Kelly fall completely flat on their face? In theory.
Come on, that's easy.
Still
it's
BK.
Easy.
BK
always.
Every day.
It's always BK. Yes. Always.
Anthony, will we find out more about Michigan or Penn State over the next few weeks?
I mean, you're going to find out about see, there's people out there that think Michigan's the number one team in the country.
I totally don't get it.
I don't get it either.
I think we're going to find out more about them because they still haven't played anybody yet.
Correct. And Penn State's going to they got some tough games ahead of them, right? They got to play Michigan. They got to play Ohio State.
Got Ohio State this weekend.
I think Penn State's better than Michigan. So, we'll see what happens, obviously. But I think Michigan gets exposed. I think they're going to get exposed at some point. At least I hope they do. Maybe that's my heart talking. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think we all hope so, but I think we're going to find out. I don't understand all the Michigan love simply because they haven't played anybody. I don't
nobody.
Because they have been a solid number 2 behind Georgia the whole time, and there's all this other fluctuation behind them. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Throwing a baseball question for you, Mr. Cubs fan. It's blank that former Chicago Cub Kyle Schwarber belted 2 more home runs for the Phillies last night to give him 18 career postseason home runs, which ties him with Reggie Jackson for the most ever by a left-handed batter.
And it was his first multi-postseason home run game as well, by the way. So every time I see the highlights of Schwarber, I just think of him as a Cub. And it's funny because you think about all of the guys that the Cubs got rid of, right? That were the core of that World Series team. And I think that most people would have thought Schwarber was the least of their concerns, right?
Yep.
Because it was Brian, it was Rizzo, it was Almago,
he's the most productive of all of those guys.
And he's the most productive now that is still going.
Yeah.
Not still going this year, but like still playing. He's the most productive
of that core group of young guys that you just mentioned between Bryant, Rizzo, and Baez and Schwarber.
You know how easy it would have been to keep him in Chicago?
Yeah.
He wasn't looking for like a massive paycheck. In fact, he's bounced around with the Nationals, whatever.
He was with the Red Sox a couple years ago.
Red Sox and the Phillies now. So he would have been the easiest one to keep, and they still got rid of him, and he's the most productive.
It is crazy. 13 of those home runs, because I know people say, well, expanded playoff format or whatever. 13 of those 18 postseason home runs have come in either a league championship series or the World Series.
Exactly.
And that makes it even more impressive to me. Like the fact that that's when he's doing it on the biggest stage. It is just crazy because he's hit 90, like in the regular season, 93 home runs, 198 RBIs the last 2 seasons in Philly.
I mean,
I know the batting average is down and everyone, a lot of people talk about that. He's got a lot of strikeouts. He led baseball in strikeouts this year, but he was also number 2 in walks. It's like
that's who he is. I mean,
he is Mr. 3 true outcomes guy. And the fact that he had, what was it? I think he had 115 hits this season, drove in 104 runs. That's almost an RBI every time he hit safely.
Yeah. I would love to have him back. Let's just put it that way. And yes, he doesn't hit for average, but those Schwarber bombs are awesome. They're just awesome. I remember watching him when he was hitting them for the Cubs. I mean, he was a hero on that World Series team because his first game back was the World Series.
Yeah. As Michael said, now there's a DH in the National League. He can play every day.
Yeah.
That did kind of surprise me that knowing the DH was coming, that they didn't do more.
I'm shocked.
I think he's actually benefited because Wrigley is, it's not a small ballpark. Someone just brought up, that Philly is a little bit smaller. That's very true. He got to play at Fenway. That's not a big park, but I also think that just like they had so many hitting coaches going in and out of Chicago, and it seemed like they could never, like they were always tinkering with all of those guys, so I think he's probably in a better place. They won I think they went 70-42 and they moved him to the leadoff spot this year. Can't argue with it.
Right. They put him in leadoff for the Cubs for a while. Remember that?
Yeah. And that seemed like, they had to send him back down to the minors afterwards because they said it screwed him up so bad. But again, remember that stretch, man? He just couldn't figure anything out. It seemed like he was all tied up, but it's a thing of the past now. So he was always, I loved watching him swing,
Me too.
He was always putting the barrel on the ball, and they're just killing it in Philly right now. Castellanos is doing pretty well, even though he was only a part-time.
He was a rental for the Cubs, but he won't be forgotten anytime soon.
Nope. All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for tonight. Appreciate y'all joining us. We will be back once again to finish off the week tomorrow. Vince, I will talk to you then.
Yes, sir.
Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you next time on IB Nation Sports Talk.